There is a strange tension that fills the room whenever an empath enters. Those who live superficially, who command others by tone and posture, who seek control through humiliation, suddenly go uneasy. They do not know why. They only feel that something within them has been seen, and that this seeing is intolerable. The empath carries no sword, no shielder. Yet the very air bends around them, as if they were a mirror made of soul light reflecting the unspoken truth of every heart nearby. And it is precisely this mirror that terrifies the disrespectful. For in the presence of the empath, the lie of dominance collapses and the fragile architecture of the ego trembles. What I call empath is not a sentimental creature nor the soft-hearted rescuer our culture imagines. It is a person whose psyche has grown porous, whose boundaries between conscious and unconscious have few suffering and inner work. Such a being feels not only emotions but archetypal movements. The shadow currents that swirl beneath the masks of civilization. When the empire stands before the disrespectful, before those ruled by the persona of control, a secret drama unfolds. The shadow of the oppressor meets the light and empath's awareness, and this encounter, though invisible, creates psychic friction. You can sense it, an unspoken battle of energies that exposes what power truly is. A disrespectful one, you must understand, is enslaved by fear of inferiority. Their arrogance is armor, their mockery a desperate ritual to keep vulnerability buried. When an empath meets them, the empath does not fight yet. Their very stillness awakens the repressed shame within the other. The disrespectful feel stripped naked before a gaze that sees without judging. That is the most unbearable gaze of all, to be seen and not condemned, for it drops the ego of its defense. Thus hostility rises. They dominate conversations because they cannot tolerate the resonance of conscience that the empire silently evokes. If you wish to understand why, you must descend into the architecture of the psyche. Within every human being dwells the shadow, that realm of rejected instincts, forbidden desired selves. The disrespectful have banished their own tennis into that darkness. They have repressed the child who once begged to be loved. But repression does not destroy. It only hides. The empath's presence acts as a subtle lantern within that cave without avert. They illuminate what was exiled. And what awakens first is anger. For anger is easier than grief. The disrespectful rage not because they hate the empath but because the empath resurrects the part of them they try to bury alive. I have often said that, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light but, by making the darkness conscious. The empath embodies this principle through their very existence. Their sensitivity is the fruit of inner confrontation. They have already faced their own darkness. That is why they radiate calm. They have met pain without fleeing, and discourage becomes a vibration that others can feel. Those who have not yet faced themselves misinterpret that calm as judgment, a superiority. But it is not superiority, it is self-possession born of integration. The empath no longer divides the soul into good and evil. They contain both. And that wholeness emits a silent authority that threatens those still living in fragmentation. Consider the dream of a young man I once treated. He dreamt of standing in a grand cathedral where statues of saints turned their heads to watch him. In shame, he tried to cover himself only to realize he was clothed in light. The saints whispered, "Do not fear your illumination. It is what others deny." This dream, I told him, reveals the archetypal drama of the empath. The cathedral is the world of the collective psyche, and the statues represent the rigid personas of society, those who appear holy but are frozen. When a living soul radiant with awareness enters such a hall, the stone trembles. The frozen archetypes awaken in fear because life itself has entered. That is why the living disturb the dead and the empath disturbs the spiritually dead who disguise their lifelessness as power. The disrespectful live through projection. They see weakness in others because they cannot endure it in themselves. When they meet an empath, the projection collapses. Suddenly the weakness, the fear, the craving for validation, all of it reflects back. This creates psychic dissonance so sharp it feels like exposure. Have you noticed how some people immediately mock or belittle those who are gentle? That mockery is not strength. It is panic. They are defending the fortress of the ego from the flood of empathy that threatens to dissolve the illusion of superiority. To disrespect the empath is an unconscious attempt to re-establish control. But deep within their soul trembles, for something in them knows the one they mock holds the key to their redemption. If you are such an empath, you must understand this dynamic not as punishment but as initiation. You were not made sensitive to suffer endlessly at the hands of the unseeing. You were made to bear witness to the hidden movements of the human heart. Yet many empaths remain trapped in cycles of self-doubt, asking, why do they treat me so poorly? What have I done wrong? The answer lies not in wrongdoing but in resonance. You awaken what others cannot yet face, and until they are ready, They will translate that awakening as discomfort and hostility. But remember, it is not your task to convince them. The empath's path is not persuasion. It is presence. To hold your light without apology is the highest act of rebellion in a world addicted to masks. You see, a disrespect arises from spiritual amnesia. The disrespectful have forgotten their own sacredness and therefore they cannot recognize it in others. The empath by contrast feels that sacredness posing in everything: a tree, a child's laughter, the quiet between words. To such a soul, cruelty is unbearable because it violates the unity they sense beneath form. Yet this very capacity makes the empath appear threatening to those who live through separation. Unity terrifies the fragmented psyche. To acknowledge oneness would mean surrendering control. And the ego would rather dominate than dissolve. Thus the empath becomes a mirror not of comfort but of existential challenge. I tell you, this energy speaks before words. When an empath walks into a space, the collective unconscious stirs. Archetypes recognize one another beneath the surface. The warrior feels the healer's vibration and grows restless. The tyrant feels the presence of the liberator and tightens his grip. The child within the abuser weeps though the man himself scowls. These are not metaphors but psychological facts. The psyche communicates through symbol and resonance, not logic. To be an empath is to live in constant dialogue with these invisible exchanges. And to survive one must learn discernment, not withdrawal born of fear, but boundaries born of wisdom. For the disrespectful cannot truly harm the empath's essence. They can only tempt it into self-betrayal. The true danger is not external insult, but internal doubt, the moment when the empath begins to question their own perception. This is how darkness wins, not by overpowering light, but by convincing light that it has no right to shine. Yet within every empath burns an ancient memory, the memory of wholeness before fear entered. That memory is indestructible. It whispers even in despair. You are not strange for feeling deeply, you are ancient for remembering. Let's descend deeper in myth. The empath corresponds to the archetype of the wounded healer first embodied by Chiron, who could heal all but himself. This archetype reveals the paradox of empathy: sensitivities born from pain. One cannot truly feel another suffering without first having blood. The empaths intimidates not because of perfection but because of their scarred beauty. They're proof that pain can become wisdom. They disrespectful sense this alchemy and envy it. They crave the power that comes from integration. Yet they refuse the crucible of self-confrontation, so they attack what they secretly desire. Hatred, after all, is often the shadow of admiration. Do not imagine, however, that this dynamic is external only. Within each of us lives both empath and disrespectful light and denial intertwined. The empath within seeks communion. The disrespectful within seeks control. The journey of individuation demands that we reconcile these forces. When you judge another for their arrogance, look inward and ask, where do I dismiss my own sensitivity? When you fear another's gentleness, ask, where have I abandoned my tenderness? In this way, the outer conflict becomes a mirror of inner evolution. The world will continue to mirror our unfinished integration until we become whole. Sometimes I think of the empath as the moon and the disrespectful as the sun, in excess blinding, overbearing, incapable of seeing its own shadow. The moon does not compete, it reflects, yet in reflecting it reveals what daylight conceals: the stars, the infinite, the soul. Thus the empath's quiet illumination exposes the vastness that the loud cannot bear. Those intoxicated by their own light will always mock the moon, until they wander into darkness and realize that without her reflection they are blind. Empathy then is not weakness, it is the highest form of intelligence. The wisdom of interconnectedness: to feel another's pain is to pierce the illusion of separateness that sustains cruelty. The disrespectful call it oversensitivity because they fear its implications, that to harm another is to wound oneself. In truth, empathy is a revolutionary act, for it deaths and restores the soul to its rightful center. The world, however, rarely honors such revolutions. It ridicules them. Yet history shows that every transformation begins with those who feel more than they should, see more than they are allowed, and love more than is safe. So when the disrespectful recoil from you, do not discomfort is a sign that your presence has stirred the stagnant waters of their unconscious. You are the wind that awakens the buried seed. Your task is not to drag it into bloom, but to trust that life itself will complete the work. Remain centered in compassion. But remember, compassion without boundaries is self-betrayal. Even Christ withdrew to the wilderness to restore his strength. So must you. The time will come when the very ones who mocked you will seek your counsel. For the truth you carry cannot be silenced. It only waits for recognition. The empath's journey is long, but it is the journey of the soul returning to its origin. And every act of endurance, every tear, every misunderstood silence contributes to the slow awakening of collective humanity. The disrespectful fear you because you remind them of what they once were innocent. open capable of wonder. But innocence frightens those who have built empires of control. They sense that your heart cannot be purchased. And that is the greatest threat to all who traffic in manipulation. Yet remember, the purpose of your light is not to expose others but to reveal yourself. The ultimate power of the empath lies not in reading others but in remaining true to the inner truth that perceives without hate. When we speak of empathy, we are not describing a mere emotional capacity. We are touching upon an ancient mystery of consciousness itself. The ability of one psyche to resonate with another as if both were strings vibrating upon the same invisible harp of being. This resonance terrifies those who are enslaved by the mask of disrespect. For in their world, connection threatens control. To feel another's inner world is to admit that the self is not supreme. To recognize a soul outside oneself is to surrender the illusion of dominance. Thus the disrespectful man must remain deaf to resonance. He fears what it might awaken in him, the memory that he too was once tender. Once open. Once capable of awe before the mystery of life. When the empath mirrors the disrespectful, something catastrophic occurs in the unconscious. The shadow revolts. The shadow, long silenced, feels the call of truth in the empath's gaze and begins to claw its way upward. This is why the disrespectful suddenly erupts in anger or ridicule. They are not reacting to the empath's behavior. They are reacting to their own repressed being. The empath, by simply existing, becomes a catalyst for this eruption. In the symbolic language of alchemy, we might say that the empath is the philosophical fire and the disrespectful is the lead awaiting transmutation. The fire does not judge the lead. It only exposes its density so that transformation may begin, but to the uninitiated that exposure feels like annihilation. You see, the human ego is a fragile structure built upon denial. It must maintain a certain image to survive, the image of competence, control, superiority. When empathy approaches, that image begins to crack. The empath does not need to speak. Their very vibration contradicts the ego's fiction. They carry authenticity. And authenticity disintegrates falsehood merely by existing. That is why the disrespectful cannot look the empath in the eye for long. The eyes of an empath are thresholds to the self. They do not merely observe, they enter. They traverse the surface and arrive in the hidden chambers of another's psyche. The unintegrated soul cannot bear such intimacy. It feels invaded when in truth it is being remembered in dreams. This dynamic often manifests as the motif of the mirror. A symbol of confrontation with the unconscious. Many who harbor arrogance dream of a mirror that shatters when they look upon it. This represents the psyche's inability to sustain self-reflection. Now imagine an empath as that mirror, alive and walking. Wherever they go, they reflect the unspoken truth of others. To the self-liberating, to the self-deceived, it is torment. They will attack the mirror to silence the reflection. But mirrors, even when corrected, still show fragments of truth. And the more they are struck, the more they multiply the image until the aggressor stands, surrounded by countless reflections of his own face. That is why in many mythic traditions the wise appear humble and quiet. Their power lies not in assertion but in reflection. They do not conquer the disrespectful through argument. They dissolve them through presence. The most potent force in the universe is not domination but coherence. When the empath energy remains centered, it creates a field of psychological coherence around it. Within that field, lies and facades cannot endure for long. The disrespectful will either flee or begin, however unwillingly, to change. For the psyche, even in its arrogance, secretly hungers for wholeness. The mirror that humiliates also heals. I recall a woman who came to me in despair. She said, "Everywhere I go, people seem to turn against me. I am kind, but their faces harden. I feel like an intruder in every space." As we explored her dreams, we found recurring images of fire. She would enter a room and candles would flare or curtains would smolder. I told her, "You are the flame that reveals the dust. The fire is not your enemy, it is your nature. Those who carry suit will fear you." In time she realized that she'd not cursed but luminous. Her suffering was the birth pang of awareness. Once she accepted her file, the world stopped treating her as a threat. For she no longer sought approval from those who feared the light. This is the paradox of empathy. It heals what it disturbs. The discomfort it causes is not cruelty. It is innate, and disrespectful are being invited unconsciously to meet their own depth. But few accept this invitation willingly. It feels safer to ridicule what they cannot comprehend. In such moments, the empath must remember hostility is often the soul's way of saying, "I am not ready to see myself." Compassion therefore is not a weakness. It is understanding the timing of transformation. You cannot force awakening upon another without violating the law of the psyche, which demands readiness. And yet the empath suffers deeply in this role. To feel so much, to perceive the wounds of others so vividly, is to carry a cross invisible to the world. They long to be met with the same depths they offer. but instead encounter resistance, suspicion, even contempt. This creates a loneliness that echoes through their very bones. It is the loneliness of one who sees in color while others insist the world is gray. But this isolation is not a punishment, it is a gestation. The empath is being trained in the sacred art of detachment without disconnection to love, without losing oneself. Only through solitude can such maturity be born. The disrespectful often mistake this detachment for weakness. They believe the empire's retreats because they are fragile. They do not understand that withdrawal can be an act of power. The refusal to engage in psychic warfare. True strength is not in the ability to strike but in the ability to remain unmoved. In ancient symbols, the serpent shedding its skin represents this evolution. The empath, like the serpent, must release old patterns of rescuing and absorbing. They must learn that to heal others does not mean to bleed for them. Compassion without discernment becomes self-destruction, and the universe does not demand martyrdom, it demands consciousness. Now let us turn inward. For this confrontation between the empath and the disrespectful is not merely interpersonal, it is intrapsychic. Within each of us resides both figures. The one who feels and the one who mocks feeling. The inner empath is the bridge to the self. The inner disrespectful is the guard of the ego's fortress. When you find yourself ridiculing your own tenderness, calling it naive, excessive, inconvenient, know that the disrespectful archetype is active within. It whispers that sensitivity is a liability, but this is a liability of fear. The soul's evolution depends on the reconciliation of these two forces. You must let the empath and the disrespectful sit together in silence until understanding dawn. In that silence the truth emerges. Empathy without boundaries leads to chaos, but boundaries without empathy lead to tyranny. The whole psyche must contain both the openness of water and the structure of stone. The disrespectful teach the empath limits, the empath teaches the disrespectful compassion. This is the alchemical marriage. The inner union of opposites. When achieved, you no longer attract external disrespect, for you have integrated the part of you that once tolerated it. The outer world only mirrors the inner arrangement. When you cease disrespecting your own sensitivity, others will follow suit. The battle ends not through conquest but through wholeness. It is easy to say, I wish people respected me. Harder is to ask, where do I still abandon myself? For every act of self-neglect, every time you silence intuition, suppress emotion, or remain where your soul withers, is a subtle permission slip for others to do the same. The universe echoes our inner posture. To change the reflection, one must alter the stance before the mirror. Thus the empire's greatest weapon is self-honoring. Every time you say no without guilt, every time you trust your perception despite doubt, you reclaim power from the archetype of disrespect. The energy that once flowed outward to soothe the others inward to fortify a being. You become sovereign again. The world does not need more empaths who absorb pain. It needs empaths who transmute pain. To transmute is to hold the vibration of love without dissolving into the suffering of others. It is a work of alchemy, not sentimentality. The true empath is not overwhelmed by darkness, for they know that darkness is only light unseen. They understand that the disrespectful are not enemies but teachers, symbols of the ego's resistance. Each confrontation opportunity to refine perception, to anchor peace more deeply. The more the empath understands this, the less power the external has over their inner equilibrium. I tell you this not as theory but as psychological law. What you do not integrate within will confront you without. If the disrespectful continue to appear in your life, do not curse them. Ask instead, what fragment of myself are they dramatizing? Perhaps it is the assertive aspect you have repressed. Perhaps it is the unapologetic voice you have silenced. The psyche in its infinite wisdom will summon outer characters to embody whatever inner role remains unclaimed. The empath who learns this ceases to play the victim and becomes the observer. The conscious dreamer within the waking dream, and here lies the chilling truth. The one that even the strong fear. Empathy is power. Not the loud visible power that dominates, but the subtle gravitational pull that rearranges realities. To feel is to influence the disrespectful sense. This though they cannot articulate it. They sense that your mere presence alters their psychic structure. That your awareness threatens their carefully constructed world. It is not your words that intimidate them. It is your being. You do not challenge them through confrontation. You challenge them through coherence. You stand as evidence that another way of existing is possible. And that realization undermines the foundation of their false strength. Thus when the empath meets the disrespectful, the universe is staging an initiation for both. For the empath, it is the test of self-trust; for the disrespectful, the invitation to humility. The encounter is sacred, though it may appear chaotic. Beneath the tension, an ancient intelligence is at work, the self, chestrating encounters that serve evolution. If you can see this, you will cease labeling others as enemies. You will understand that every soul plays its part in your individuation. Even the cruel are instruments of awakening. So let them misunderstand you. Let them project their insecurities upon you. Do not descend into their drama, for the impulse task is to hold the higher frequency of awareness where they seek to provoke. You remain a mirror, where they seek to dominate you remain present. Over time, their aggression will exhaust itself against the silence of your being, for silence is not absence, it is supremacy. Only the grounded empath can wield such silence, for it is not repression, but mastery. The one who no longer needs to prove is untouchable. There comes a point in the empath's life when the old way no longer works. You cannot keep bleeding for those who mock your wound. You cannot keep explaining your gentleness to those who profit from misunderstanding it. The soul begins to rebel against its own pattern of self-sacrifice. And this rebelling is not cruelty, it is awakening. What you once called compassion was in truth often an unconscious attempt to earn safety. You gave endlessly because somewhere within you believed that love must be proven through suffering. But now the old alchemy reverses itself. You begin to see that true empathy does not require the death of the self, it requires its resurrection. When I speak of self-respect, I do not mean pride or defiance. I mean the sacred act of honoring your energy as a vessel of divine consciousness. Self-respect is the recognition that your sensitivity is not a floor to hide but a temple to guard. The empath must learn that the heart is not a public square. It is a sanctuary. To open it to every passerby is to invite desecration. The disrespectful, unable to build temples of their own, seek to enter yours uninvited. They mock what they secretly crave: connection. A tenderness of truth. But once you know the worth of your inner kingdom, you stop leaving its gates unguarded. You realize that not everyone deserves entry. For not everyone seeks communion, some only seek conquest. This realization marks the beginning of psychological alchemy. The empath who once absorbed insult now transmutes it. Every disrespectful encounter becomes material for transformation. You feel the sting of contempt. Yes, but instead of drowning in it you observe. You sense the vibration of insecurity behind it, the shadow that lashes out to protect its illusion. And in that observation, something shifts. The pain loses its poison. You no longer identify with the role of the wounded. You recognize yourself as the alchemist, the one who turns projection into insight, hostility and understanding. This is not emotional detachment, it is spiritual refinement. Gold is forged only in fire, and empathy, when refined through awareness, becomes gold. There is an ancient principle in the psyche. What is unconscious in one will be acted out by another. When the disrespectful ridicules the empath, it is because he cannot tolerate the vulnerability he represses. He must make it external to see it. In that moment, the empath becomes his mirror and his confessor. Yet confession without consciousness leads nowhere. The empath's task is not to absolve but to illuminate. Illumination is silent. You do not need to explain their behavior nor heal them. You need only to remain the witness through whom truth is seen. When you refuse to collapse into reaction, you interrupt the ancient chain of projection that keeps humanity trapped in unconscious cycles. You become a point of evolution in the collective soul. But this demands courage, for the empath must endure the loneliness of not being understood. The world does not easily recognize silent strength. It glorifies dominance and mistakes volume for conviction. Yet in the invisible realm of psyche, stillness is the mightiest force. When you hold your center in the face of disrespect, you are performing a sacred act of psychic reordering. You are teaching the world wordlessly that emotional control is not suppression but sovereignty. You are saying, I choose not to mirror your chaos. I choose to remain whole. And this choice ripples through the collective unconscious, altering it in ways unseen but profound. Empathy. When conscious becomes architecture, it builds new possibilities for human relation. Let me tell you something most do not dare to know. The empath's journey is an initiation into divine polarity. Every insult is a test of frequency. The moment you answer disrespect with equal disdain, you descend into duality. But when you meet it with awareness, you rise above the battlefield. This is not passivity, it is transcendence. It is the difference between a warrior and a fighter. The fighter strikes to win. The warrior stands to reveal truth. The empath is such a warrior of the unseen. Their battlefield is the field of emotion and their weapon is understanding. In many dreams, this transformation appears as an image of fire becoming light. The dreamer walks through fires yet feels no burn. The fire owns district now illuminates. This is the psyche's way of showing mastery over energy. When you no longer fear emotional heat, anger, contempt, rejection, it ceases to control you. The energy that once scorched you now becomes radiance. You do not escape pain by fleeing it. You transcend it by becoming transparent to it. The empath who achieves this transparency no longer absorbs emotion, they allow it to pass through, purified by awareness. They become a living prism through which human suffering is transmuted into wisdom. But beware, many confuse transcendence with dissociation. To rise above does not mean to detach from reality. The true empath does not float above life like a ghost. They are deeply embodied. Their feet are in the soil of experience. Even as their spirit touches the infinite, they do not deny pain. They breathe through it until it reveals its message. Every emotion, even sorrow, carries sacred data from the unconscious. To repress is to lose the conversation with God within. Thus empathy must remain grounded. Otherwise it becomes sentimentality, a cloud that weeps without purpose. In this balance lies the secret of power. The disrespectful seek to control by fear. The empath governs by coherence. Control is brittle, coherence is eternal. When you are coherent, your energy aligns thought, feeling and action into a single vibration. Those who dwell in fragmentation cannot withstand that vibration for long. They will either align or depart. This is how the empath purifies their environment. Not through argument but through energetic integrity. Every space you enter either rises to meet your frequency or reveals its unwillingness to do so. Do not lament what leaves. What departs was never in resonance with your truth. You must understand, my friends, that the universe is not moral in the way humans imagine. It is vibrational. It responds not to pleas but to frequencies. The empath who continues to dwell in self-pity attracts further disrespect, for pity vibrates at the same level as victimhood. But the empath who radiates quiet self-respect attracts honor because honor is its harmonic. The universe does not reward suffering. It rewards alignment. You are not here to prove your goodness through endurance. You are here to embody truth through awareness. As you embody it, you will find that the disrespectful begin to fade from your life. As mist evaporates before the sun, not because you have banished them, but because you no longer sustain the frequency that invites them. Where once you attracted the teacher through pain, you now attract the ally through resonance. This is the natural evolution of consciousness. Every boundary you set, every truth you speak is a recalibration of your energetic field. You begin to meet others who see not your sensitivity as weakness, but as wisdom. They do not drain, they exchange, they do not mock. They mirror light. The empath finally learns the joy of mutual recognition, a sacred communion between souls who had mastered their shadows. And yet, even as you ascend into such circles, the old world will still call your name. You will be tempted to return to rescue those still lost in arrogance. This temptation is noble. Buddhajros do not descend into unconsciousness in the name of compassion. The healed empath helps by example, not by immersion. You can extend the hand, but you must keep your feet on the mountain. Otherwise both will drown. Remember, the purpose of the light is to shine, not to chase shadows. Sometimes when the soul grows weary, it dreams of rest, of a quiet garden where no disrespect enters. This dream is not fantasy, it is prophecy. For as you refine your energy, you create such gardens in the invisible wherever you walk. Peace follows. Even those who once disrespected you will sense something sacred and grow silent in your presence. It will not be fear that restrains them, but reverence for the human soul at its deepest level. Recognizes mastery. When it encounters it, the empress who has become conscious emanates that mastery. Their silence is prayer, their gaze, benediction. But mastery carries responsibility. To hold such power demands humility. The moment the empath uses their sensitivity to manipulate to prove superiority, they fall back into shadow. The same gift that heals can harm if governed by ego. The only safeguard is continual self-observation. You must ask yourself daily, am I acting from love or from the desire to control? For even subtle pride, I am more aware than they, is poison to the soul. True awareness is never proud. It is compassionate and clear, like a mountain lake reflecting heaven without effort. At the heart of this teaching lies one final paradox. The empath and the disrespectful are not enemies but partners in evolution. The disrespectful provides the friction necessary for the empath's fire to burn brighter without opposition. Empathy would remain sentimental through conflict. It becomes conscious through pain. It becomes precise, and one day, perhaps in another lifetime, the roles may reverse. The one who disrespected may awaken and carry the torch of empathy themselves. Thus, the universe weaves all souls into the same tapestry of awakening. No encounter is wasted. No wound is meaningless. So if you have been hurt by the cruel, do not curse them. Transform them within. When you forgive consciously, not as resignation but as understanding, you reclaim the energy that once chained you to the past. Forgiveness is not the denial of justice. It is the refusal to remain bound. The moment you release resentment, the alchemical circle completes. Lead becomes goal, you are free. And in that freedom, something extraordinary occurs. The disrespectful no longer intimidates you. Your compassion intimidates them. Your peace becomes their mirror, your calm their confession. You walk through a world still ruled by chaos, yet untouched by it. This is not detachment from life but mastery within it. You have become the embodiment of Jung's deepest vision, the integration of shadow and light, emotion and wisdom, human and divine. When the empath reaches the final stage of awakening, the battle no longer exists outside of them. The disrespectful no longer appear as enemies, but as symbols, projections of forgotten aspects of humanity's collective psyche. The empath has become a living temple of integration. In such a person, the boundary between the individual and the collective begins to blur. For they now act as a vessel through which consciousness flows freely into the world. What once wounded them now worships them. Not because the world has changed, but because perception has the same energy that once humiliated now kneels before the same truth it once denied. That is the quiet miracle of transformation. Nothing outside truly changes until the inner world is reordered. It is here that empathy transcends sentiment and becomes what I call kingdom consciousness. The recognition that the psyche is not personal property but sacred territory shared by all beings. Every emotion you feel, every insight you embody vibrates through the web of the collected soul. To heal yourself is not a private act. It is a contribution to the evolution of humanity. The disrespectful in their blindness tear the fabric of that web. But the wakened empath mends it stitch by luminous stitch. They are the unseen weavers of civilization, restoring coherence where fragmentation has ruled. Society mocks them as fragile. Yet all stability rests upon their invisible labor. Look around our world. Everywhere you see noise, aggression and false power. Yet beneath that noise there are souls who walk softly, anchoring sanity through their quiet awareness. These are the empaths who have passed through a furnace of misunderstanding and emerged whole. They no longer need recognition. Their presence itself is influence. They are what alchemists once called philosophers of light. Those who transmute chaos into clarity simply by existing. Such souls intimidate not through dominance but through depth. The disrespectful sense that something vast, eternal and unyielding resides behind the empath's calm. And they cannot name it. It is not authority born of ego, it is the authority of truth. This truth has no need to argue, no impulse. It stands like a mountain, silent, unmoving yet shaping the climate around it. This is what true empathy becomes when purified of fear, a mountain of still compassion, weathering every storm without losing form. When you reach this point you do not need to defend your boundaries. They become organic like gravity. No one can take what you no longer offer unconsciously. No one can invade what you have sanctified with awareness. The world may still shout but its noise longer enters you. You have become transparent to chaos and that transparency is invincibility. Many who embark on the empath's path imagine the goal is peace. But peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the mastery of inner harmony amid conflict. It is the ability to walk through noise without losing silence within. That silence is not emptiness, it is fullness, a resonance with the divine order behind appearances. When you are anchored in that silence, the disrespectful can no longer manipulate you because manipulation depends on reaction. Your stillness starves the drama of oxygen. Their disrespect folds in on itself, revealing its own smallness. The greatest victory you see is not to defeat the other, but to dissolve the battlefield entirely. Yet this mastery brings a new challenge. Responsibility. The more consciousness you carry, the more your very thoughts become creative forces. You must wield empathy with precision, for your vibration shapes worlds. A careless word from an awakened empath can cut deeper than a sword, while a silent blessing can heal a stranger. You are no longer permitted the luxury of unconsciousness. Your life becomes a prayer. Every gesture, every gaze an act of creation. The disrespectful may never understand this, for their world is built on action. Yours on intention. But remember, intention is the seed of all action. You are working at the root, not the branch. In the final phase of individuation, one begins to see the shadow not as enemy, but as servant. But disrespectful to becomes a kind of servant and unwilling participant in your growth. Each act of contempt they offered was in truth a disguised initiation. They showed you where you still bled, where you still sought approval, where you still confused love with submission. In that sense you owe them gratitude. Through them, you learned that the world mirrors the condition of your own energy. Through them you discover that power does not shout, it emanates. And through them you became what you were always meant to be. An awakened center of consciousness, undisturbed yet deeply involved in the human story. At this level of being, empathy reveals its cosmic nature. It is not just the ability to feel another's pain, but to recognize oneself in all things. You feel the river as your own bloodstream. The forest is your lungs, the sorrow of a stranger as your own forgotten grief. This is not sentimentality, it is truth, for the soul is not divided by skin or name. To live in such awareness is to live as an instrument of divine reciprocity. You give because a giving is breathing. You forgive because holding resentment would suffocate the whole. The disrespectful cannot comprehend this unity, for their consciousness still operates through separation. They think in hierarchies, you live in circles. Their world has up and down. Yours has within and without. And what is within them terrifies them most. That is why empaths will always intimidate those who disrespect. You are the living proof that another paradigm exists. A world not governed by control but by communion. Your eyes carry the memory of that world. The disrespectful sense it, though they may never admit it. They feel that around you their usual weapons, mockery, dominance, manipulation, fail to penetrate. They sense that your strength is not personal, that it flows from a dimension untouched by fear, and fear finding no in you withers. This is the moment of revelation, when the energy of the disrespectful collapses under the gravity of your awareness. They may call you strange, arrogant, or detached. But beneath their words lies recognition. They know they are standing before what they once lost, their own soul reflected back through yours. It is not your task to awaken them. Your task is to remain awake. Every being will find its own dawn when it can bear the light. Until then, your peace is the invitation. The more you embody coherence, the more the collective psyche reorganizes itself around you. You are not merely living your life. You are radiating evolution. Every time you forgive instead of retaliate, every time you choose presence over reaction, you tilt the balance of the world toward consciousness. Empathy, when fully awakened, becomes the most revolutionary force on earth, because it dismantles the illusion of separation that fuels all cruelty. And yet, even in this mastery, humility must remain. Remember that you are to once leap. The disrespectful you meet tomorrow may be the echo of who you were yesterday. So let compassion be your crown, not pride. To see clearly is not to condemn but to comprehend. To comprehend is to liberate. The awakened empath does not pity the blind. They light the past. Sometimes with words, sometimes with silence, but always with presence. You may, if empathy is so powerful, why does the world still suffer? Because power alone does not guarantee wisdom. Humanity is still learning to wield the heart. We have learned to split atoms but not to unify souls. But it begins with a few, those like you who dare to lie from the center rather than the surface. Every empath who masters themselves becomes a stabilizing field in the collective unconscious. Empathy multiplied becomes civilization's immune system, cleansing the toxins of cruelty and indifference. That is your calling, not to escape the world but to infuse it with awareness. And so when the disrespectful sneer, let your heart remain open but not exposed. When they belittle, let your silence answer. When they lie, let your truth stand without defense. For your very being is proof of what humanity can become. You are the threshold between unconscious and conscious life. The world will test you, but only to reveal to itself that it can evolve. What intimidates them is not your gentleness. It is your wholeness. Wholeness radiates authority, and authority without aggression is the rarest form of power. In the end, empathy is not a role, it is remembrance. You are remembering what all souls once knew, that life is a single organism dreaming itself through many forms. To harm another is to harm oneself. To honor another is to expand oneself. When this truth becomes not concept but consciousness, the disrespectful lose all power over you, for you see through the illusion of division. The mirror has cleared, only light remains. You no longer reflect wounds, you reflect eternity. And so I leave you with this truth. As one who has studied the labyrinth of the soul and walked through its darkness, you are not weak because you feel deeply. You are powerful because you can hold the world without breaking. You are not strange because you care. You are ancient because you remember. You do not intimidate because you're dangerous. You intimidate because you are real in a world addicted to masks. And those who disrespect you today will one day look into your calm eyes and recognize the part of themselves they lost long ago. When that day comes, do not say I told you so. Simply smile, for the mirror has done its work, and in that reflection humanity sees itself, and not as enemy, not as victim, but as one that is the chilling truth and the liberating one. The empath does not destroy the disrespectful. They awaken them, and in that awakening both are set free.